Hi, welcome to Board Gems. This is my weekly video series in which I go over an older board game gem. And this week is a card game from mid-2000s and it's called Art Eco. Now it was designed by Kawasaki Susumu and was originally self-published by their own company, a Kawasaki Factory it's called, just a little indie company, a printing company. And this edition is from Japan Brand. Now Japan Brand is known for basically having the Japanese indie developers kind of get together. Japan Brand has a booth at the Essen Spiel Game Fair every year in October. Obviously not this past year, but they're really big on kind of promoting Japanese games in the hobby. And they will actually kind of publish multilingual versions of some of these indie games. So this is the Japan Brand edition. And it has rules inside in Japanese, English, and German. So that covers a lot of gaming ground there. Japan Brand acts as sort of an intermediary and helps Japanese game designers license their games to other companies internationally. So for example, besides this one, there was an English edition from Z-Man Games, which uses the same artwork, mostly, not the cover art, but I think internally it's the same art. And then Amigo in Germany had their own edition, and they commissioned their own art. So this edition is for 3 to 5 players, although I've seen other editions say 2 to 5. It takes about 30 minutes to play, and it's for ages 8 and up. And all that's pretty accurate. I'll show you how it plays, then I'll talk more about why it's a gem. To set up the game, place these 4 cards in the middle of the table. The order doesn't matter. The cards represent 2 sort of sides, and so 8 sites total. These sites are going to be where players deliver their recyclable goods. So the red recyclable goods, which I think represent cardboard, will go here. The yellow cans here, the green newspaper here, and the blue plastic bottles here. These 4 are dump sites. Now, on top of each one of these cards, you are going to add a pile of these scoring cards, and you're going to order them so the 0 is on top, 1, 2, 3, and unless you're playing with 3 players, you're going to have another 3. So to shorten the game a little bit for 3 players, take out a 3, -2, 4, and 5. So you're going to add these to each of the 4 sites. Now shuffle up the deck and give each player 3 cards. Cards will show one of the 4 different types of recycled goods, and some of them will show double goods. So this is 2 bottles, not 1. After you've dealt out 3 cards to every player, then add 1 card to each dump site. And you're ready to begin. Over the course of the game, players are going to be delivering recycled goods to the proper recycling depots. And whenever one person adds cards such that the total on all the cards is 4 or greater, then the cards get recycled and the player who made that last delivery will get the topmost scoring card. Now you're looking at the zeros and you're like, big deal, why would I want the zeros? Well, each color will only score you if you get at least 2 of that color. So even though the 0 alone won't score you anything, it'll help you score other cards. It'll help you get to that 2 card minimum threshold. That also means, because each pile has a -2, if that -2 is the only card of that color you have, you're not going to lose 2 points, because you need at least 2 of that scoring card color to score. So pick a start player and play as clockwise. So on your turn, of the cards in your hand, you're going to pick 1 color, and you're going to deliver as many cards of that color as you like. If you have 2 cards, for example, of the same color, you don't have to play both of them if you don't want to. You could just play 1. So you'll play here. You've delivered these cans to the yellow recycling depot. After you deliver cards, you take whatever is on this side of the depot, the dump side. So in this case, there's just 1 card. So this player who already has a green card in their hand will be able to add another green card
like so. And then afterwards, you add more cards to the dump. Now the number of cards added to a dump is always the number of garbage plus 1. So all these sites, there's no garbage delivered, so just 1 card is drawn. But this has 2 garbage, so we're going to be adding 3 cards. At the end of your turn, check how many cards you have. You can have no more than 5. If you have more than 5, you have to discard, and that's called illegally dumping. For every card you have greater than 5, and you can choose which cards, you will discard them by putting them face down in front of you. Each card like that is going to lose you 1 point at the end of the game. It doesn't matter how much garbage is on it. Each card is worth -1. If you're able to go through the entire game without illegally dumping, you may get a bonus. We'll talk about that at the end. Then it's the next player's turn. If they're able to add enough cards such that the total is 4 or more, the exact same thing happens. The player's going to get whatever cards are here, but the recycling depot is going to process these recyclables. What happens is these cards will go away, and the player who made that final delivery is going to get the topmost scoring card. And they just keep that in front of them. As usual, they're going to take all the cards that are on the opposite dump site. And then, as usual, add cards such that it's the amount of garbage plus 1. 0 plus 1, just 1 card. The game continues like this until all the scoring cards of one color have been claimed. You still finish that player's turn, so that player will still have to illegally dump if the result means they have more than 5 cards, and then is scoring. For every card that you have at least 2 of, you will score the sum. So in this case, this player will score 1. This player would score 0 if they just had this card, because you need at least 2. In addition, every player who went through the entire game without dumping illegally will get a bonus. They will get 1 point per player, or 2 points per player in a 3-player game, for every other player that illegally dumped. It doesn't matter how much they illegally dumped. They could have 1 card in front of them or 10 cards in front of them. But anyway, they illegally dumped, and any player who didn't is going to score that bonus for every player who illegally dumped. And the player with the highest score wins. That's it. You're ready to play our Eco.
Our Eco was one of the early wave Japanese games to come out internationally, or for us as hobbyists who maybe aren't in Japan to find out about. I think the first might have been Fairy Tale. Of course, there have been a number of Japanese games that have come out and gained popularity since then. Of course, you have Love Letter and Machikoro and anything from Oink. Oink Games is great, but Oink Games didn't start until I think around 2010, 2011, something like that. I mean, this edition came out 2006. This was, like I said, in the kind of the early wave of releases coming out of Japan. It has kind of a unique theme in that you're recycling, and it actually comes out pretty well in the gameplay mechanisms. So you can think of each player as sort of a company. Maybe they have their own truck, but the truck has limited capacity, right? And if they're not able to handle all this capacity, then they have to kind of secretly dump it. So it's kind of a unique theme, and it's a really nice flowing game. So one thing I like about our Eco is it has a very nice arc. You know, there are some games that don't have a reliable arc. I'm thinking of Race for the Galaxy, for example, in that the game could have a nice arc, you know, a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it's tense the whole time, but sometimes one player can just run away with a victory, and then the game's over really fast. And some people like that. Some gamers I see, you know, post on Board Game Geek or whatever, saying, hey, that's great, you know, and if the game is over too quick, no worries, just play it again. It's like, no, I won't enjoy that game, and then I won't want to play it again. I like to have a more consistent arc. That's one reason why I like San Juan more than Race for the Galaxy, because San Juan has a proper arc. But anyway, there's a reliable arc, right? There's a beginning, which maybe you're seeking out some good cards, and there's the middle where you're trying to kind of get your card engine going, and then at the end you're trying to get those high scoring cards, right? And I like that. I like it when there's an arc. And I also like it when games kind of impose that arc with simple rules. And Art Eco does that. So in Art Eco, there are scoring cards, and they're stacked from low to high, although there is a -2 in there. And that presence of that -2 just creates this really nice arc because, at the beginning of the game, hand sizes are small, there's very few cards on the dump sites, and it's pretty easy usually to avoid illegally dumping, having an oversized hand limit. But you're gradually working toward the middle of the game, and the points are getting more and more and more, right? Up to 2, and then 3, maybe another 3, and then suddenly -2. Maybe some are 3, some are -2, or some are -2, some are 4. And then it becomes really, really tense because you want to play on some, but you don't want to play on others. And then, of course, once you get past those -2s, then it's a free-for-all, right? Trying to get those high-scoring ones. And it does create a really nice arc. And it's a pretty consistent experience. A lot of people call this a filler, and it's light enough to be a filler, absolutely. The box says ages 8 and up, very fair. Kids could definitely play it. But it's for 30 minutes, it might be a touch long for a filler, but I don't hold that against it. I think of Art Eco kind of in the same class as games like Coloretto, which I did a video on earlier in this series. Games that are really, really simple, the simple card games, but they feel just a little bit more. The game plays 3 to 5 players. Like I said at the top, some editions will say 2 to 5. I have not played it with 2. This edition does not say 2 players, and I've never played it 2 players. Of the 3 to 5 range, it's better at the lower count. So I find the 3-player game is better than the 4-player game, which is better than the 5-player game. And the reason is because, except for 1 fewer scoring card in each pile in the 3-player game, it's mostly the same. And so a 3-player game, you just have more turns to do things. Players can get kind of caught in the undertow of the flow because cards beget more cards, but you don't want to get too many cards. And what can happen, especially with more players, is your turn comes around, you don't have a huge number of options. And in a 5-player game, you're not really planning for the future, right? You're just playing for the here and now. And maybe you have to make a bad play sometimes. Well, sometimes the flow can be such that by the time your turn comes around again, you also can't play well. You only have bad choices available. Okay, so you pick the least bad choice and your turn comes around again. And everybody else seems to be doing great, but for some reason you always get stuck with the bad choices. That can happen in Art Eco. It happens a little less often, like I said, in 3 players versus 5. In 5 players, you're really just dependent on the whims of other players and the randomness of the cards. It's still fun, but 3 players is where it's at, I think. I have to say one thing, is a little bit of annoyance, right? It's because usually when I'm the one, like I'm teaching my family or something, I try to let the game go smoothly, right? So if cards need to be replenished or something, I'm usually the one to do that. Okay, do your turn. After you finish your turn, I'll, fix everything. I'll add new cards or whatever. Well, in this game, you're adding cards every time somebody takes a turn, you're adding 1 to 4 cards or something. And I found it quite tedious. My wife actually commented to me that she saw that I was doing a lot of work, always pulling cards out and replacing. So it's a really, really minor thing, but just a little tip. Spread that out. After a player takes their cards, have them replenish. Otherwise, it's just too much work for one person. Except for the starting hand, all the information is out in the open. Now, this can be good and bad. Your starting hand is hidden. But any cards that you get, you're never drawing cards from the drop pile. You're always getting face-up cards from the dump sites. So, except for those initial 3 cards, it's actually easy to see. You can't help but see what other people are drawing. And that can introduce a little bit of a memory aspect for some people. I agree that's not the best thing, at least for me. I'm terrible at memory. One other player can see like, oh, I know they've been collecting a lot of yellow. I haven't seen them play yellow, right? There's only so much they can do with that information anyway. So I don't think it's a huge deal. If you want, you could try to play with open cards. It totally works. This game is available for play for free on yucata.de. usually with games implemented at Yucata, if information is trackable, they just put it out in the open. Even Black Friday, which has hidden information, a lot of hidden information, because again, it's trackable, so just have it face up for everyone to see, and it still works. So there's a few different editions. The original one, published by Kawasaki Factory, is just in a little cardboard, like brown cardboard box, I think with maybe with a label or sticker on it. So that's like old, 2003 or something that came out. So this is the first edition that most people would have seen, the Japan brand from 2006. And I love it. The cards are really easy to riffle shuffle. They're really nice quality cards. I love it. And the tuck box, as you can see, just barely holds everything. So you're not, no wasted space in this edition. The Z-Man edition, I'm not sure if I've seen it in person. I don't remember. But from photos on the internet, it looks to be maybe about like that big, like significantly bigger. Don't like that. Wouldn't be interested in that myself. The box is really big and it uses cardboard tokens. I happen to really like the cards of this one, just a preference. I mean, they're certainly easier to stack than little cardboard discs. If I couldn't get this one, then the edition I would probably go for is the Amigo one. The Amigo one also uses cards for scoring instead of cardboard chips. Completely different artwork, kind of more of a typical light-hearted German game art, if that makes sense. So it has kind of anthropomorphic recyclables. Still fine, colors are clear. One interesting thing is that the Amigo edition actually has fewer cards in the deck. But it works completely fine because cards are recycled, right? So as cards are brought to the dump, they'll get discarded, and then you'll reshuffle the deck and these cards will come out again. So even though this is a really big deck, probably about 100 cards or something, even a smaller deck would work fine, honestly. So there's no problem there. This game is a filler, right? It's a light, simple game. It's easy to explain. The strategy is not completely obvious. I mean, usually there's like a best place to play. You can play badly, that's for sure. But whether you win or not will depend a lot on luck and will depend a lot on other players. So and especially in a 5-player game, that chaos of the other players plus the luck element, whether you win or lose, won't feel like it had anything to do with your decisions, mostly. So I strongly recommend this game on the lower player count. You want 3, maybe 4. And at that number, it's great. I love it. It's a filler, and it might be for some people a little bit long for a filler. So, for a 3-player game, you could easily play, if everybody knows the game and just plays quickly, you could easily knock out a game in 20 minutes. 30 minutes is probably more fair. But it's just, I find it's a great game. I love having this game. It doesn't work for everybody, mostly because the scores can vary so greatly. So one player can have 20 points, another player can have 10, another player can have 0, right? So that's not necessarily going to be fun for everyone. It's very possible that if you play a 4-player game of this, one player will really like it, 2 people will think it's not bad, and 1 player will really hate it. They're probably the one who scored 0 points or 1 point or something like that. But it works really great as a filler for hobbyists. It's not a super thinky filler or anything. It's really simple to learn, but it has a really nice flow, and it has a nice arc, as I said. So the beginning feels different from the middle, and then the end is quite tense. So I happen to really like our Eco, and that's why I am covering it as this week's board gem. Thanks for watching. Remember, older games like our Eco don't stop being good just because new games come out. Take care.